There's not sides to this. This is we the people versus the globalists. That's all there is. And I've been saying that the entire time I have been on this channel. Our other owner, we always have been here for the people. That's why we don't have our pictures on anything, because we don't want to be the face of it. We've done one interview and our faces were not shown because we do not care to be the face of this. I don't want to be famous. I just want to fix my country because I have children. So the narrative propaganda is what is pushed whenever people victimize themselves. Whenever people like, I lost this, so I need $500,000. No, you don't. No person needs $500,000 to live off of. So that's what you have to understand is it's the propaganda. They create chaos. They get us all worked up and then they have the solution. And then they make money off of the solution. They create the problems and they profit off of the solutions. And that's how it works with every single setup. Same thing with 1-6. They created that problem. All of them. That was not just Antifa. That was all of them. And now they're
Yep.
profiting off of the prisoners.
So,
All of them.
Kelly, I'm sorry to walk on you, Lulu.
No, good.
Kelly, if I may ask you, just point blank matter of fact, we are working on 7 points of evidence. They're very distinct, very precise 7 points of evidence. It puts the fingerprints of human beings together, working diligently to unearth those documents, those evidence points. They own, literally, they own what they have unearthed. It's not someone telling them the truth. They actually put their fingerprint on it. What else can be done other than the truth that will actually prove unequivocally what has transpired?
Okay, so I actually filed a case. I have one. I did it as a whistleblower because when I was in Michigan, the location was unsecure. I saw igloo coolers, like the giant ones, being rolled in, suitcases. I saw all kinds of stuff. I recorded it. And so I had all of that evidence. So I actually filed a whistleblower case in the US Supreme Court against all 50 states because in this election, under the COVID narrative, they changed and modified the law to allow for fraud to occur. What I know from every state that I have touched, which is all of the contested ones plus about 3, I know because we were gathering evidence in all of them at the very beginning because we were manning the hotline. And we literally found out that it was always done with these excess ballots. You know, they went on this whole, and that's what pissed me off at Sydney at the very beginning, was she went off on this, got everybody caught up in the machines, but it was always the ballots. And what that did was bought them time to make sure they could do a count and make sure their numbers added up. And we knew that from day one. So the things that I know that we can defeat is going to be the ballots, because those ballots are going to look like crap like they did in Arizona. And you're going to have, I mean, like obvious where they had to duplicate or they brought them in or something's wrong with them. You've got the ballots. I believe off of several witnesses that I've talked to, and the stories are the same, it seems, in every jurisdiction, is that every machine, when it was flipped on the morning of the election, had already a protected amount of ballots on it. That number fluctuated throughout the election, but it never matched on a lot of machines. It never matched the number that they were scanning. It was always greater than. So I don't know if that's
I want to
algorithms.
say too, Kelly, that what you're saying, the ballots, that's exactly in Texas when we started. That's exactly what we found with the early vote. And whenever we got a hold of some emails between some elections coordinators, um, basically what was happening was that they had mailed out all these ballots, and when people went to vote, they were like, "I don't want to do mail-in voting." And instead of canceling the mail-in votes, they were double voting. So in Texas,
Correct.
our early vote was literally double what it always is, and we're historically the third to last in early vote. So if you go back and research, this is important to remember because all this foreign interference crap, it's important to go back and figure out where that started. It did not start with Trump. And if it did, if Trump ever said anything about it, he was talking about ballots. He was never, ever talking about machines being hacked. That was a narrative, propaganda narrative that was started by McCurney and Sidney and all of them. They started that China
That's
crap.
that's not true.
No, it
Who?
came out of the election out of Clinton.
Out of
No,
who?
because I'm the person who wrote all the information on
But
it
Trump,
because I
no,
pin
Trump was
tested.
saying the ballots is what the mail-in ballots is what they were
Right,
going to use to manipulate everything.
right, but if you look at the October CISA document that they call the Iran memo, it talks about how Eshayun, which is an Iranian APT team, was found going into a company called 10X. 10X
Oh, okay, yeah, I forgot
operates
about
the
that.
poll
Sorry.
pads. I had cataloged at the midterms, we found that 10X had such a bad system. Their CISA, their main IT guy, was saving passwords and text files throughout the server. So every time you hit a gate, if I needed to go into that gate, there was a text file that gave me the password. His main admin password to get into the voter roll for in all of Florida was green 37, and the password to get into the training for all of the poll workers was pink. So you
That's
had
weird.
10X, and 10X also did the voter rolls here in Texas at midterms. And so when I was at ASOG and we were still working on everything within that, we actually had a politician from over in Dallas who was supposed to be doing this big unveiling of new 10X poll pads. And I was working on a plan because I could get into not just the 10X system, but remotely I could get into the Texas voter rolls, because who ran the Dallas County Texas voter rolls? Clarity Elections, which was Seidel. And those systems were unsecured. This was before they moved everything over to AWS, which AWS is not secure. I'm one of the investigators who worked for, when I was at ASOG, we helped Oracle put out the report that was given to the Pentagon to get AWS kicked out of the JEDI program, because that system was required by the Chinese Communist Party to have access into every container within the AWS world. So right now, your entire election system exists in AWS, and they don't even need to hack it now, because if you look, Eric Coomer sold the command and control system for all of Dominion's systems to Jeff Bezos. So now Amazon has the entire command and control system over the elections within their holdings. So when I was at ASOG and we were investigating 10X and these other organizations, we found all of these security problems, and we started finding. I used a simple website called RobTex. If you look at my affidavits, the way I made them was I made them to where John Q. Public could do it. I didn't use a piece of software you'd have to spend thousands of dollars for, like Burp Suite or anything like that. And in RobTex, whenever I could look through those background system infrastructures, I could look at the SSL certificates, I could map their entire network and see what it was doing. And companies like Edison Research and Dominion, you could start seeing interconnections into foreign systems. And so my initial affidavits were specifically targeted towards specifying that, because of Trump writing Executive Order 13848, because 13848 had to do with foreign interference in the elections. And if it was found, then it would become a whole of government approach. That's why later you would see Pompeo and Navarro write the reports that they had. But the problem was the IC was not tracking it as they specified they were supposed to be, because if they totally missed the background interconnect from Belgrade, Serbia, which, not for nothing, in 2016, I have images and emails and evidence that Hunter Biden went and met with officials from Dominion in Belgrade, Serbia, or Belgrade, Serbia. So he went and met with him. I have pictures of him in Belgrade. And then not shortly after that, that's when UBS Bank, who was already under investigation by the U.S. State Department and other organizations, put in $400 million into Staple Street Capital, which owned Dominion. And then on top of all of that, some of the other things that I cataloged, you had guys like Andy Huang, who used to work for China Telecom. And China Telecom is banned by the U.S. State Department from operating within the United States. So their main system architect for Dominion that's operating in Toronto worked for the CCP. And one of the other caveats that I found was there was a website called DominionVotingSystems.com. And when you map out that website, it is part of the Great Wall of China, because China copies every website in the world, and then they put it on their servers, and if the Chinese people try and go and look at it, they see what the Communist Party approved version of that website is. So when you go to DominionVotingSystems.com on RobTex, and you can start to look to that system architecture, it's an exact clone, but with Chinese servers. So I've got, and that's where, when you look at some of the data coming from Mary Fanning and that 6.5 V file and a lot of the stuff that Lindell was trying to pimp out for Scorecard, what it was they were capturing all of this background information and trying to reverse engineer it to make it look like something that Montgomery was propitiating. And
Josh,
I
are you
could
able to show any of this? Some people are asking if you're able to show any of these documents.
Yes, I have all the files. What I will do is I will set this up. I have it on a drive, and I will post that drive in this group so everyone can, because I literally have hundreds, if not thousands, of files cataloging this for the past 3 years, and not just my affidavits, or like I knew I was going to be speaking to an audience of lawyers and attorneys and people who know F all about computers. So I knew I had to like break it down Barney style.
Okay, I want to
Also,
add
it
one more.
says, hold on one second. Is 10x the same 10x that Clinton's connected to?
Yes.
Look,
Okay, so I
everybody's
want.
like, good Lord, this guy's in the know. Yeah, he is in the know. That's why I got silenced.
So I need to add one more thing to Josh, because Josh brought up the very, very greatest point that I was going to make sure everybody was aware of. So you have Mary Fanning, Dennis Montgomery behind the Lindell thing. Mary Fanning is married to an attorney, and I'm not going to give his name because he'll be blowing me up with the man letters again.
But it's not just. But it's not just behind the Lindell thing.
Oh yeah, no, that's true. It was behind. Yeah, it was behind Sidney Powell too. You're right.
All
This
the
is the Hammer
first
scorecard.
information was like literally sent to Andrew Whitney, and then he created this this massive data file. And believe it or not, I mean, Dr. Shiva himself too was given access to this file, and they even had a data agreement on this stuff. And I think a lot of this file was what was passed on to Lindell as being the master hacking file. So,
but I have to tell y'all the greatest, most craziest connections. So Mary Fanning is married to a gentleman who works for Kirkland Ellis, who's an attorney out of Chicago, or a law firm out of Chicago. Kirkland Ellis also has, well, after Obama was done, one of his attorneys at the White House, I can't think of what their actual term is, but anyway, he goes straight over to Kirkland Ellis. When what was the, anyway, I know who this is, but Bill Barr comes out of there and comes out of Kirkland Ellis, goes straight into DC. So you've got a firm that's got Obama tied, Mary Fanning tied. Oh, they're also the firm that handled the Dominion acquisition and merger, or the purchase from, Josh, what's the name of the company?
You're talking about Premier after Diebold turned into Premier, and then
Yes.
ES&S tried to buy them.
Yes. So they handled the purchase. So Kirkland Ellis handled it for, was it Capital? I always mess this one up. Capital Street, or is it Street Capital Investments? There we go.
Staple Street Capital.
Staple Street. There we go. So Staple Street, all of those ties come to Kirkland Ellis, which goes straight to Bill Barr. That's what everybody needs to understand.
And here's the even crazier part. In midterms, whenever because I worked on the Pete Sessions case. Yes, I know, Salty. We were
I like
in
that guy.
we were in the boardroom with Pete, and he calls up to Bill Barr to get some face-to-face time. He was going to take me, and we were going to sit and have face-to-face time so I could brief him over everything. And he agreed. And then 15 minutes later, his chief of staff calls back and says, "Oh, you need to go and meet with the local U.S. attorney." So,
And I also need to add too that so what you were referring to as to the e-poll books with the 10x and all of that. So that's the issue. None of those electronic poll books are certified, and that's where they can manipulate the voters registration or the poll, like who we've got actually registered, so that as you're checking in, they're pulling data from God knows where. So those are kind of in my mind, those are the issues, because that's where they're getting the increased voter rolls so that they can increase their ballots. It's not really the machine. So they were misdirecting us to Dominion One, because all of these machines do the same thing. All of them are always connected to the internet, whether they want to say they're not or they are. They can, and they have been, and they will be. And even in the next new standards that they're about to adopt out of the EAC, which is the federal group, those standards still allow for them to be connected to the internet. So all of that was gamesmanship. Everything about the machines, pretty much all of them, ES&S, Hard Civic, Dominion, all of them, they do the exact same thing. They have the exact same capabilities. How it was described to me is basically, think of it as like Cadillac and, was it GMC?
yep.
Yeah, so they're different casings, look a little bit different, but underneath the hood, they're all the same. So it's that we all need to understand.
So Josh,
Yeah.
it's my understanding to my knowledge, yeah, many of these machines have the capability to connect to the internet, right? And you can change that on and off in BIOS. However, most of these machines need to be updated. So just connecting to a intranet, right, and not saying that it's actually going outside of the intranet, a secular system, I mean, that's okay, right? That's how they do their updates, and that's how they can upload new software and things of that nature. But at the election time, that's the important part about whether or not they're connected to the internet. And
let me explain to you why, and I'll tell you about Georgia. Because Georgia, at the Fulton County Center, there was a little unknown thing that happened. If you're connecting a computer to the internet previously, and then you disconnect it and you connect it to an intranet, that intranet still leaves trails. And so me as a black hatter, what I can do is say that computer has a Wi-Fi system that's turned on or turned off, and you connect to the internet, do your updates, disconnect it, connect to the intranet, and you leave it sitting there. If you connected to the internet and I saw it and I was quick enough, I can hack your system and put what's called a rootkit in it. Now, when I put that rootkit in, and you take your computer and you connect it over to your intranet and you think you're safe, right? Well, guess what they did in Fulton County to get around that? They hacked the smart meters, or the smart thermostats. So smart thermostats inside Fulton County were accessed. So if that smart thermostat is accessed, I can send a wake up packet to that laptop, and now I can put it back on the internet.
Yeah, I don't.
Because I've done it. We had to prove and test it because Russ saw it and he said, "Can they really do this?" I said, "Yeah, I've done it before whenever we were doing pen tests, because I've done pen tests on like my daughter, her dad is one of the heads of IT over at American Airlines. So in my spare time, I go and I pen test airplanes to find every way I can to hack them, to keep them from hacking, because I have equipment that I use that I can hack every radio frequency that almost exists." So,
And to clarify, the reason for that type of hacking is to prevent other people from being able to do it.
correct. That's one of the, my side projects and things I work on is I help break stuff that someone may not think of a way to be able to break it. So we know that the smart thermostats were accessed in Fulton County. So that led us to showing that those systems, even though they were on an intranet, were compromised. And we did see communications going through that entire building. In other locations, there were different methodologies. Y'all were talking about CTCL earlier. If you move one more tier up, look at Election Task Force. Election Task Force is really sort of the overlords. The overall plan, like if you had to point a finger at one dude, that dude is now dead. His name is Trumka. He was the former head of the AFL-CIO. That was the brainchild. And then
Yeah,
he
so
created.
and you
Go
can
ahead.
find that in the Time article. I was going to say you can go look up the Time article about I think they call it like securing democracy or something like that. But that's what it is. It breaks down what organizations were involved in stealing, and they say fortifying democracy, but really it was theft of democracy. But I want to add one more thing because Josh is right. In Texas, in the ES&S systems, our issue came from and I know Williamson and I believe Tarrant, and I think there's one more, but I don't remember who it is, that they had a thumb drive installation of software update for the system, and it created a problem when they ran their test on it the next time. Well, the EAC, which is the federal group, right? They gave them a waiver and said, you know what, it was a de minimis change. Don't worry about it. No big deal. Do you know what that looked like on the ground? It's the same thing that happened in the Dominion systems up in Detroit, which is
Yep.
for a lot of them, which is how, is it Talib, I think, that's up there
Yep.
in Michigan? Yeah,
Rashida
so
Tlaib.
yeah, so Talib, the way she won re-election and the issues that we had in Texas was that the ballot styles would flip. So people were voting for Talib outside of her district because I guess they couldn't get her popularity up enough. So anyway, that's what it was causing, was this error where it was like flipping precincts so people weren't recognizing the name, and chances are they'll bubble the very top one. And that came out of a thumb drive update on ES&S, and I have the documentation on that. And where they're saying, and then also when I trace that back to the standards at the EAC level, you cannot use thumb drives. That's an unapproved method for updating software, and yet that's what they did on a lot of these systems. So the systems are trash, but those ballots we can count. And if those ballots are wonky, that will tell us they've done something with the system. It's, I guess, pretty much what I've come to, because Josh knows, I know, we will never be able to see what happens inside those systems because the contract with the states, they have a proprietary interest and they agree. So our governors and our secretaries of state, they sign off on and say, we understand that by using your systems that we purchase using federal dollars, that we will never be able to test or look at the source code or any of the actual mechanisms within them internally. And because of that, we the people will never know if our vote ever actually counts
Okay,
once we
so
cast it.
Right, but Kelly, hold on for 1 second. So let's walk that back. So in New Jersey, by example, and I'm sure it's not isolated, we have commissioners that are on the record from receiving donations from Dominion, right? We have it on the record.
Yeah,
So
their lobbyist
how,
is Nancy Pelosi's former chief of staff.
okay, that's, so how can we, the people, constrain them from having these contracts, whether it be at the direction through bid by the state of 3 providers or not, which is the case in New Jersey, right? How can we do that? And what facts can we have encapsulated in one document that constrains those contracts, that says, because of these examples, you are not permitted by the people, by we the people, because it's our taxpayer money that's paying for it.
And that's where the corruption comes into play, because we only have
Hey, y'all.
apples, oranges, and bananas to choose from. Everybody's in bed with the apples, bananas, and oranges. And we can't get all the way from the federal government and who they're in, like our congresspersons, and EAC had closed door meetings with them when they were getting the new standards approved. They had a test model, and I think the guy's out of New Hampshire. You can Google it. There was a case where he filed saying, I want these machines off the internet. We had agreed to standards where these machines would be off the internet. You changed them behind our back. And he actually said on the committee that established the certification standards for these machines. And they changed them after a closed door meeting with Dominion, ES&S, and Hart Civic. And this guy ends up suing the EAC, and it's still pending as far as I know. It hasn't been dismissed. But it's these companies and it's these people that have investments in these companies. I mean, you've got, I think it's Kevin McCarthy. I mean, you can go through, they're all associated with one of them. And you see patches, like pockets of where, you know, they're bigger. The thing is they have approved this through the EAC that we are never going to be able to get internal to them. And then our governors sign off on it because those funds go to the states. So the HAVA funds go from the federal government to the states to purchase these stupid machines that they're all financially vested in. And then the counties then purchase them after I'm sure they get some kind of sweet kickback or, you know, contribution to their races, or the cities or whoever's passing these. And that's the problem we have, is that we are excluded, and we're not paid off. And so we're looking at it going, we want to secure our vote, and everybody else has betrayed our trust. And so and I'm watching this because people will send me their town hall meetings because I've met so many people along the way, or they still keep up with me, and they'll send me clips where they go to their commissioners and they're griping about these machines, and the commissioners are just kind of like shoo because I mean, they're looking at the money trail. It's the same thing they've done with every system that we have. It just happens to be elections. We happen to be very aware of it, and we know that without this vote, without my vote, without your vote, we have no chance at ever having a Republican form of government ever again. What we have is an oligarchy. And we know this, but the only way to get rid of it is, I mean, because your courts, I've tried to file cases on this stuff, and the courts are literally like, oh, well, these are the state. We can't do anything about that. You know, this is the way these systems work, and that's federal funds. And, you know, we don't have anything we can do about that. And they don't want to challenge it. So, you know, that's where I kind of realized we're beyond the courts at this point. And so if you look in your First Amendment of the Constitution, and if you look at your state constitutions, in the very top article, you know, the very first two sections, probably every state has them. I started perusing them a while back. It basically says that we, the people, have the right on the state level to abolish, amend, or do whatever it is that we need to do, not violently, but I'm saying we have the right to petition them specifically. And what I would do is I would start directing petitions. And by petitions, I mean like literally, you know, get everybody's statements together or signatures or whatever it is, and then actually draft up a petition saying we do not consent to being governed under this manner, and giving the exact reasons why we don't, why their deprivation is. And see, these are things that we can actually do. And these are things they can't. And if they do ignore it, then you step it up a little bit and say, okay, fine, we're going to start ousting our county commissioners. And then we just start having town halls over it. I mean, there are things that we can do that are not dependent on the system, that after a while they'll have to concede. Now, the issue is that the same petition needs to go to Congress to say, we do not approve that you guys get these kickbacks. So somebody needs to be researching their funds and seeing exactly who has what hands in what kitty. And we need to nail them in that petition and say, this is unacceptable because you are basically self-appointing yourself. By having this rigged system, you guys, we can't get rid of you if we wanted to, and that's unacceptable. And these are things that we have to be very specific on, because these are the things that we can actually make progress with. But it's going to have to take a lot of us.
Well, and
Really
you know, one
step
of the
up for that research tomorrow.
one of the things that I've sort of shift gears and focused on is dealing with like things at the um, at the regulation levels. For example, when they do when the EAC does a certification on the election companies and their equipment and their software, it is actually strictly voluntary for them to get it tested. So they aren't even required. And then they're not held to government standard. They're not held to NIST standards. They're not held to NIST standards in how their software is made, how their hardware is made, any of it. So I've been talking to, I know a couple of attorneys that actually deal in law writing and working on that. And I've been working on trying to get the EAC to uphold government standards on election equipment. That would be the first part. The next part is to reduce the amount of human interaction with the actual ballots. Because every time there's a problem, the first thing Dominion and ES&S and Hart and all these other companies claim is, oh, well, it's human error. Okay, well, remove the human from the process. Because the election system is really two components. There's GIMS, which is the Global Election Management System, which all of the systems have in common. And so if I can access GIMS in Dominion, I can access the same GIMS, which is the backbone in ES&S and the other companies. And then you have the second part, which is the UI, UX, the user interface that you see at the terminal. And they actually don't make that in-house. They use contract workers. And a lot of those contract workers will post their examples and things that they make online. Well, those contract workers are the ones that cause the problems like what we saw in Antrim and in New Hampshire, where they may be off by one spot and bubble 92 is really 93, and that changes the entire outcome of the election. So they're not even full-time employees for the election companies that are doing that, and there's no accountability, which ties back to like what you were talking about with CTCL. CTCL circumvented accountability by putting employees under staffing agencies to work in central count, so that then no one would know who was working in central count, by the fact that most of the workers that were employed by CTCL were political activists that came from organizations like OFA, NOI, as well as Resist, Antifa, all of those organizations. Because I helped Phil Klein catalog and go through a lot of those, because here in Texas, we were finding political activists that were working at Central Count down in Austin.
Josh, you have a question. It says,
What's
do
that?
you believe the fraud surrounding 2020 election will be corrected and Trump will be put back into office?
No, I don't.
Never.
You're fighting whole of government. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but that's why I got called the bad news bears a long time ago.
Judas
Realistic.
Iscariot.
I'm not going to sell hopium, because you're fighting the entire federal government, and they are going to do everything they can to protect themselves. The permanent party class in DC are going to make sure that we, the people, do not win this fight.
And I will
And
tell
they're
you,
fighting
I
global
disagree.
evil, too.
I disagree with him, because I know what the golden ticket is. Because remember, I told you back in the summer of 2020 when they were wargaming the strategy? Well, see, it
Yep.
happened to be that I was really lucky to get a hold of the war game strategy and all of this. And Sidney Powell absolutely chose the most loserous path that they could imagine, when the actual winner chicken dinner was always that this election was unconstitutional, because Article 1 and Article 2 of the United States Constitution said that the legislature will determine how we choose our electors for president and how we choose the manner and means of the race for, or the election for congresspersons. And we failed both of those. So HAVA upholds this. HAVA is the funding mechanism, but it has the minimum standards in there. They violated HAVA. They violated their funding requirements. And that's like, all of this is dead to rights. But any of those modifications, and you can go look up, because I've already, I mean, There is the National Conference of State Legislatures did, if you search 2020 election law modifications, you can
Oh yeah.
find under that all the ways that the states violated their own laws in their own states without even governor's consent. Because say
And
Tarrant County in Texas,
what
they did it
what
on
law
their
firm
own.
what law firm pushed for all of those states to do that? Who was in charge of that?
I don't know which law firm. I know the
Uh,
DNC is the one that
Mark
made some of those.
Elias, Perkins
There you
Coie.
go. Perkins
Russiagate
Cooley.
is election gate.
There you go. And so, but I know that like, and see, I have documents from the DNC where they were pushing out what the new provisions were going to be for the elections. Like, so they were sending flyers to their local precincts, like they're in their major counties. I'm sure it went to all of them, but how we should handle COVID modifications, regardless of what the Secretary of State said and regardless of what our governor said. That made every state's election unconstitutional. We can recall, in my mind, 2/3 of Congress is gone and we have no executive branch because it's void ab initio, because it was not a certifiable election in any of the states.
Right,
Kelly,
but the
if I
trick
could
is,
add to that, the executive orders were also usurped because in many of the states it extended the election 14 days. However, they did not stop counting the ballots until the last ballot was received. So they actually usurped their own executive orders in addition to the Constitution.
Correct. Correct. And so,
In
yeah, you're
addition,
absolutely right.
in addition to that, the question that I have regards HR 4. So HR 4 passed the House. That usurps the Constitution. It also, because it's built on the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which
Correct.
was overturned by the Supreme Court, so they usurped the Supreme Court. The letter that embodied that legislative act is formed by the body of members of nonprofits that they all funded through entitlement programs. So once again, it was a Ponzi scheme.
Correct.
That included the AFL-CIO. So
Correct.
including that legislation, they usurped the Constitution.
Correct. And
So
that's the stuff that we've got. Like if we all focused, like if every state went in and focused and they got their major counties and they figured out what their governor's orders were, pulled their code and figured out exactly what happened. Like I know, like so I give Tarrant County because I'm right next to it, but Tarrant County is where they did mass mail out ballots. Well, mass mail out ballots are not lawful, period. Like they are, even the minimum standards, you've got the 22 months requirement. So if you were doing uh, public information or FOIA request, you could, ask to see, because some of them didn't keep their ballots. A lot of jurisdictions didn't because they have the printed out, like they'll print them out with the scanners. So they destroy their ballots. Any of those places that you find where they failed chain of custody, you can ask for those records. If you go through your code, and you find your election standards and you go in and you look at all of their requirements and then you go and FOIA specifically what those are. Like you find, like we could find like 7 or 8 points that we know. Did mass mail out ballots occur? Did drop boxes occur? Because drop boxes, so here's how drop boxes violate the law. It's not that the drop box in itself is illegal, but if you combine it with the fact that if you're a first time registrant in a jurisdiction, you are required on the first time that you vote to show some form of identification. It doesn't have to be an ID, it can be a bill or something like that. Well, in these jurisdictions where you were doing um, basically, they were sending out mass registrations. If you use the Dropbox method, you could do mass registration, request a ballot, and then drop it off at the Dropbox, and nobody would ever know the difference. So there were so many ways that they were circumnavigating. This was all intentional, regardless of what anybody wants to say. But there are certain things that if you put 2 or 3 steps together, that process violates the law. And that violates the federal law and the state law. So,
hey, this person says, does this mean that Liz Harris's canvas isn't credible?
mm,
I don't know. I don't know
I
where that came
don't,
from. I just wanted to ask. I didn't know if I
I
missed
mean,
the connection there or something.
No, I don't know anything about like the canvases. I know people are starting the canvassing, and I know that there have been places where you've got like 75 people or 120 people registered to like a vacant commercial building. I mean, I've heard numerous of those, where there's nobody receiving mail there, period. So, the same with the same day voters registration. Oh, and then you have every state's forms. I pulled all of those when I filed my case, and none of them say that you have to actually present an ID anywhere. Like, it says you may, but it never says that if this is their first time, because there's a box that'll say, is this your first time registering in this jurisdiction? If you click yes, then it should be an automatic. You are required to provide some form of identification at the first time that you vote. No form, no state says that
So
anywhere.
what points exactly, Kelly, were in your claim? Exactly what points?
So that the state site that I was talking about, the National Conference of State Legislatures, in their chart, I went through their chart and then started pulling stuff. And then I get into the technicals where Josh is at, because Josh is right. There's a lot of standards that are violated, because my understanding is every certification is based off like the base model of the machine, but they can keep adding software on top and on top and do updates and do all kinds of stuff that they got busted this last year in the EAC's audit, because there were like Microsoft Azure that was in the Pacific Northwest. They specifically said, "Hey, you cannot use this software. There is no evidence that this is secure software," and that's in their own audit report. So I used their own weapons against them when I filed. So I went in and pulled out the NIS, or actually like the CISA standards, the DHS. I started pulling out some of that stuff. And then I'm pretty sure Josh could probably do a hell of a lot better job than I did. But I just focused on things that I knew happened in each jurisdiction. I pulled where they modified without without any authority at all, like where the governor's orders were trampled on. And I just tried to focus on all of that. But my intention at some point was to basically turn around, and then once this ever kind of progresses, then start, kind of doing an all call for everybody to start dumping their data up there on specific counties and stuff like that, until we could just decertify them all. And that's really well, actually, the suit that I filed causes economic damages to the states. And some of these states, it would probably absolutely bankrupt if they had to pay back the CARES Act money and their HAVA grant money from last year. So I was kind of thinking, okay, I can pigeonhole them, and then that will give Trump like a Trump card, right? So he could come back and say, hey guys, you know what? I know she's got you dead to rights. Here you go. You can either pay, or let's hold another election. And so that, I mean, because that's all I want, is I want a lawful election. I want one
What
where we have our standards in
I want to
place.
make something clear to all of us that are speaking about this. We have all been in contact with all of these people one way or another. One of us may have been in contact with one of them, two of us may have. We're not making opinions off of stuff that we have not encountered ourselves. So everyone's saying that we're all sticking up for each other. We don't even, like, we know them or something. We do know them. We've been psyoped to hell by all of them. So that's why we're on here telling you this, because there's 4, 5, 6 of us on here that have been going through this crap for the last, well, some of them longer than us. And that's why we're talking about this, because we actually do know these people. We have worked with them. We have talked with them, and we have been the smaller guys that they treated like crap. So that's why we're telling you they are not here for us. They are here for propaganda and money and to thwart the efforts. They are creating the problem and getting profits off the solution. That's what they do.
Hey, I just want to say hi.
She's the Arizona lady. Say hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Oh, y'all can't talk. Sorry.
Nice meeting you
Hello.
guys. I appreciate everybody's input and for helping me put some, connect the dots. I saw the propaganda side of it from the very beginning, right before the audit started, right after, and been trying to blow the whistle ever since. But everybody I went to for help ended up being part of the operation. So I'm sure they're all laughing at me. But I didn't ever stop trying to blow the whistle, and I will only talk crap about people that I have firsthand experience with, which is a lot of the people that they're talking about. So, anyway, I appreciate that. I would like to say, for most people, we don't want any machines, period, in the audit. We sat there and watched audit cameras from day one, and you understand it, but everyday people aren't going to understand it. And even if you could prove it, I don't know how you guys would sell it to us. So that's why I've never followed that much of the cyber part of it. I think most people want paper ballots, and I understand there's potential for fraud in everything, but I think most people would say no more machines, paper ballots. Because I was made aware by Aaron Wagner about the polling pads.
The
So
guy who died recently, they don't
yeah,
know how he died. Nobody will tell us anything.
yeah,
So
he worked on the first, well, the hand count, or the first two little things that Maricopa ordered initially. So I think there was one other point, but does somebody have a question?
I just want to say something to Kelly. I get that there's a lot of anger and rage, and people are focusing on fixing 2020 before 2022. I get that. Okay. Do I agree with the level of the fraud and the impact, and whether or not certain areas had fraud that was material enough to change the outcome of the election? I don't know. The problem I see, though, is everybody that wants to just fix the 2020 election, I feel like they're missing the forest, right? Because yeah, sure. I mean, definitely try to have the audits and try to make sure and try to figure out what went wrong. But at the same time, there needs to be a cognizant effort to trying to change things by filing lawsuits, not seeking to overturn the election, but smaller lawsuits with smaller pieces of the pie. So when 2022 does come around, at least maybe we'll be prepared um, to like monitor the election better, right? Like maybe we need to have more poll watchers. Maybe we need to have more people working out in the field. But
We've
if nobody's
already filled
paying
up our
attention to
8,000
that,
precinct chairs.
if nobody's paying attention to that, then everything related to 2020 is just going to be tied up in the courts, and there's going to probably be no resolution.
Right,
So
but
that's why,
David, the problem, David, is HR4, right? So
yep,
HR4 is now pending congressional vote. The minute they go back, we're in big trouble. If
it
they pass
modifies
that,
all of our laws.
it's states' rights are gone. States' rights will be
Correct.
gone. HR4 changes the game, and it's not acceptable. We have no
And I'm not saying
recourse.
that we just let it
Our
pass.
sovereignty will be gone.
I'm not saying just let it pass, but I'm saying who is out there trying to make a difference for 2022?
Oh, I am, because the
Just us.
lawsuit I have filed, I mean, as long as that's pending and they don't have something else that, like HR4 that modifies the law, I've got them stuck. So if they take more money for more HAVA grants, for more election crap, I mean, I already shut down Merrick Garland because I started throwing crap at the DOJ as soon as he came out and said, we're not going back to pre-COVID voting standards. I was like, you want to bet, dude? Because you're actually telling the states to violate the law. How does that work? You know, it's, you can't, and Trump is right about this. It's not so much about Trump, except for me, I have bigger issues because I'm also part of the COVID doctors group. And I know this country is about to go to hell in a handbasket. And I know we're about to be screwed in three ways if we don't get this shit under control. So yeah, it's great to say, let's look at 2022. I don't know that we make it there. And that's not being Lynn Woodish. That's factual.
No, I agree with you completely, 100%. If we don't fix this, we won't make it. There's too many
Well, and
things
it's not
happening.
even about putting Trump back in office. It's about
No, no.
transparency and knowing that we chose our president, whether it be Biden or Trump. It's not about we have to get him back. Of course, we think he was a
And
better president,
everybody down
but at this
and
point, we
everybody
can't
down
even do a
ballot
freaking
too.
audit and it be done right.
Yeah,
What'd you
but
say? Yeah,
it's
down ballot.
also
Like,
everything down ballot. I mean, this I've been watching elections since 2012 or 2002, and they were stolen back then. So this has to end, and everybody down ballot needs to be audited. But literally, they hijacked the audit before it even started. So
I mean,
I
that's my point, right? Look, so
but
all these groups who got together to fund and to pull off the Arizona audit with all the problems that have arisen because it was a very biased.
but you're assuming that we knew that. We
No,
didn't know
no, no,
that.
no, no, no. I'm not assuming that. I'm just
You
saying
are.
there was a big opportunity that was wasted, right? I think it was wasted. I'm with you. I'm with you, Eric Hughes, NA. I'm with you. I agree. Okay, but that big opportunity that was a national issue for the past, what, 9 months, right?
Exactly.
They blew that. And because they blew that by trying to, I think they blew it because they were more worried about the money coming in, right? That put
Blow it,
that put
David.
everybody in the back seat when it comes to smaller audits at smaller county levels, right? So at some point, there needs to be just as many people working on making sure that the problems are fixed for 2022 as fixing 2020. And dude, all these politicians, several of them are thinking, I mean, they're doing their calculations, right? Like, I'm sure every one of them wants to fix like 2020 to some degree. But at what point are they going to lose all the moderates? They have to balance their electability with fixing the 22. I think they're doing their calculations. So I don't like
I
how people
think
like Wood are just attacking any politicians who won't come straight out and say fix 2020 or nothing, because there
Well,
needs to be a effort.
it's not about that. It's they've got to let us have transparency to look at what happened in 2020. And that's
I
the
agree with that.
problem is that we're getting redirected, we're getting misdirected. Look at what's happening with this channel. They're sending them down rabbit holes to keep them out of the actual issues, which is every state's ballots are the problem. You've got machine issues, but we'll never know that because there's no transparency there. So all we can do is look at paper, and then they're going to poo-poo us when we say, hey, wait, this paper is the wrong paper, or why has this ballot like been duplicated 4 or 5 times? Like
I
that's the
agree with you.
problem.
I
Is
agree.
and
I
here's
just don't want to
and
lose
here's
moving forward because we're so focused on the past. I'm not saying
well,
the
I
past
get it,
I get
but it's
where, so I'm at the
accountability.
same kind of point. I'm at the same kind of point with David going through all of this with the channels. We've done so much work, and then to see what happened with the Arizona audit, and now we don't know who we can trust. So what I've been doing and what all of our admins have been doing is we've been getting everybody signed up for precinct chairs because we're like, okay, look, we don't know if this is going to go anywhere, but the least we can do is get
There
people in
you go.
positions before
There you go.
2018. And we've
That's
filled
right.
over 8,000 precinct chairs.
That's
And
right.
our freaking Houston chapter the other day, they haven't had a packed, like a full overflowing precinct class. Like, I can't remember how many people were in there. They had more people than they had ever had. And they said, I don't know what that Telegram channel is, but y'all sure are sending us a lot of precinct chairs. So I get both sides. We do need to fix it, but also we can't forget about all these positions that matter because there is a midterm coming up, and that's what they want us to do. Is just audit all 50, and then they fill the precinct chairs or they're just empty. That's why Dan Schultz comes in here all the freaking time. And we love Dan. Dan is legit and he doesn't care about anything but filling these precinct chairs. That's what we're doing. So
I think
just
you're
because
on target. I
somebody
think you're on target. Like, we have to do smaller, more localized efforts, right? So we can prevent this from
we
happening
have
again.
groups that
At the
work on
same
both.
time, people like Kelly, but it seems like it's just Kelly doing all these, I'd say, functional lawsuits that
That's why we
actually
have
are
to,
making
yeah,
a
that's why
difference.
we're doing this because we have to
Yeah.
come together. That's the whole point of this is because there's a few of us that are actually doing the right thing. And people need to realize that. People need to realize these leaders are not leading us down a path of succession. They are, I mean,
Do
success.
not.
They're, we know what to do. We know what they're doing. And we've figured out pretty much what we need to do. But we need all the people to come together with the people and leave these people alone because they don't know. They're literally trying to sabotage us.
But they're
So,
seriously brute forcing this whole thing.
yeah.
There's no
Yeah.
finesse to this.
Yeah.
Tell us about it. Tell us about it. They've isolated us too. They've isolated us from each other so that
Oh,
we
yeah.
aren't, we don't compare notes. So, I mean, it's been psychological warfare from day one. I've only talked to the only person in this chat right now that's talking, the only one I've ever spoken to before just now is Salty Lulu. So, I'm sure they're not happy that we're all talking right now. So, I'm glad we're all here. Let's just not be critical of what we've done, and let's figure out where we're going to go, because I don't have as many people on my channel as Salty does, but I mean, they're all trying to figure out what the heck to do next. And I don't even know what to post because I don't trust anything coming out. Nothing. So I
So
want to
let's
help
talk
people. I
solutions.
don't know what to tell them. What's next? What do I tell my
Let's talk solutions. I mean, so where do we go from here?
David's
Well,
not
one
an enemy either.
Really
So people are
going
saying,
backwards.
who is this guy? Is he an enemy? But we're like, no, he's not. He's thinking logically because he knows what they're doing. They're trying to keep us, they're leading us down one rabbit hole and making us forget about the other. That's why in our groups, we use the main chats to try to fill precinct chairs and we use the work groups to get the audits done. We're still doing both because I told myself, okay, we better not forget about this because what if we don't get the audits? And then here we are, we didn't fill the precinct chairs either. So just because somebody has a different opinion doesn't mean they're the enemy. And y'all have got to get that crap out of your head.
I think I want to say this. I don't know what every state's rules or law is, but in Texas, I know that the parties get to control their primaries. Well, most of our damage is actually done in our primaries because that's where your Republican Party gets to choose its, leader, and nobody ever gets really above that. And I think because they can manipulate even the primaries, and I think people need to understand that too. But I think, like in Texas, what I'm kind of calling for is that instead of using, because what happens is the party rents the election equipment for the primaries and they hold their own primary. So my thought is, okay, for 2022, so for this next cycle coming up, we need to say we're rejecting the machines, we're not paying the counties, we're going all paper. And then we pay for the paper as the party, which means you've got to convince your party what to do. And then you hold your election on paper, you get people in there, obviously you can't really change the laws as far as registration and stuff like that, but at least you'll have the physical ballots. And then maybe you guys would team up with the Democrats, because I think there's going to be some Democrats that you're going to be pretty surprised if you actually said, hey guys, because I know that I've run into some actual pretty hardcore leftists that have same concerns with the machines. They're just not upset about the 2020 election, but they're still butthurt
Exactly.
over the
Exactly.
2016.
That's the
So I
problem.
think
That's the problem
yeah,
is
so
everybody's talking about overturning the election, and that is going to cause a knee-jerk reaction from the left. I'm not saying it's not warranted. I'm just saying it's going to be very difficult to punch all this through when we should be working at the
We don't care. We don't
lower
care.
levels.
They can cry all they want. We don't care.
I'm 100% on
We want
board.
a new election.
I'm not saying
well,
that doesn't need to happen. I'm
I
just
just
saying
think this is where we could
we need
actually
to be
unify and kind of overcome some of the garbage.
Yeah,
so let
we're
me,
there, Kelly, just so you know, the process that we have put together is a twofold relationship. So our small groups are working on the 7 points of evidence. And in the interim, we're one anothering. In other words, we're teaching throughout the process, teaching about the Constitution, precinct training, you name it, and they're learning it. And they're learning it by touching the information, by talking to people who have the experience, who can mentor them. They're talking about running for, we have 4 just in New Jersey, actually 5 today. I found out another one. We have 5 members on the ballot for school board. We have several members that are at precinct. So we're doing exactly what you're talking about, but this frustration, well, the frustration is twofold, right? We have people that are still on these